Hello, brilliant people. So today I want to answer one of the most frequently asked questions that I get, which is, can you teach intuition? Now, simple answer to that is yes. Obviously, a slightly longer answer is yes. And if you read my book, The Soul's Brain, the neurology and logic of your intuition, well, you'll find there exactly how you can teach intuition or learn it. But I actually want to go into that question or go into the answer a little bit more deeply today, just so that you've got more of an idea of how you can actually teach intuition. Because learning any skill is simply a matter of learning the fundamental principles of that skill and then lots of practice. So with intuition, there are nine principles that you need to learn. Now, these nine are actually broken up into three kind of stages, and we need to get a reasonable handle on each stage before we go to the next one. And it isn't that we can forget the last stage. It's not like when you were at college, you can't forget about your first year studies just because you're now in second year. No, because each one of these stages actually grows and expands as your ability to work with your intuition grows and expands. Okay, so let's get started. So the first group of three principles is about developing stability, like stability in your awareness, stability in your ability to work with energy or whatever it is that you experience your intuition as. So the three principles that help us develop stability in our intuitive perception are completion, balance, and the ability to check in or tune in to ourselves. So completion just means if you've ever had those thoughts rattling around in your head, like things that you just get stuck on, well, those thoughts tend to take you out of the present time. You're either fixated on the past, worrying about the future. And those things make it much harder for us to be open to our intuitive perceptions. So by learning to complete them, we actually kind of close the loop on those thoughts, and so our mind can just go quiet. And then we are able to be more open to our intuitive processes. So that's completion. The second one then is balance. And of course, again, if we're going to be stable, we need to actually have our life in balance. We need to actually have our energy in balance. And yes, we also need to have our mind and our emotions in balance. Now, the more that we can be balanced in our own life, the easier it is for us to stay centered and therefore, once again, be open to those intuitive perceptions. Now, the third one is self-tuning or self-awareness, self-connection, some stable way that we can actually establish a connection to who we are, to our core, our center, have what I call an internal alignment. Now, internal alignment is really important because with intuition, it is the foundation of our perception, because in the end, our intuition, it works through systems thinking, and the outcome that our intuition is always looking for is how are we going to expand our life, how are we going to attain our brilliance. So when we are able to connect in with ourselves, have some sense of what our brilliance is, have some sense of what our values are, the more that we're conscious of that, the more stable and steady that self-connection will be. So those three things together give us a really stable foundation for growing our intuition. So completion, balance, and self-connection or self-attunement. So once we have that stability, we can then go on and develop a little bit more intuitive strength. It's a little bit like physical exercise. The first thing that you need to do is you need to get your core stable so that you're not going to do any injuries to yourself. And once you have that, then you can start to increase your strength. You can, do kind of cooler things with what you're doing. Okay, so with strength, again, there are three elements. So the first, energetically, is what we call coherence. Now, all that means is that it's a term that comes from physics, but essentially what it means personally is that we get more and more of our life is connected up or aligned with that internal alignment. Now, how does that give us strength? Well, the more that we are, all the different parts of our life are aligned with our essence, it means that we're not wasting energy. We're not wasting our strength in internal conflict. So when we have internal conflict, we waste so much energy just trying to hold the conflict at bay, or trying to go this way when some other part of us is trying to pull us that way. So when all of us is headed in the same direction, when we have this coherence, or you might know the word congruence more, when we're all headed when all of our different parts are headed in the same direction, well, yes, we're going to be able to bring more energy to whatever it is that we are attempting to do, and thereby we're going to have more strength for that. So the first principle of strength is coherence, or you can call it personal alignment. Now, the second principle is actually taking that self-awareness up a notch, getting a little bit clearer on what that is, because the more specifically we can focus, the more exactly we can create that alignment, the more that we actually get a whole lot of synergistic effects between our different parts. Now, the way that I teach that is, I teach people to tune into their own specific resonance through their soul seat. That's explained in the book. But other ways that you can do it is by really, really focusing on your core values and making sure that every choice that you make, you're going to increase your core values. Now, just like with physical exercise, in order to develop strength, we have to exercise our strength. And sometimes, of course, in order to hold that alignment, in order to stay in tune with our exact resonance, or to hold our values, we need to actually have good boundaries and to really exercise holding those boundaries. So that's the second principle of strength, is having that exact focus, that exact alignment, that we are willing to use our strength, to exercise our strength, to hold that. And the more that we hold that, the stronger that we will get. And that will, of course, then help us build a stronger coherence as well. And that will then bring us to the third principle of strength, which is of understanding that as our energy gets stronger and stronger, as we get clearer, as we move forward with this alignment and more parts of us get more and more exactly aligned with each other, things are going to change. Of course, things are going to change. This is why we want to use our intuition. We want to use our intuition to create these transformations. Now, in order for us to transform into a new version of ourselves, in order to create a more expanded life for ourselves, we're going to need to let go of the old version of ourselves, the old life. Well, that's what a transformation is. And there are certain steps that are involved in any transformation. So when we understand those steps, we can shift through these transformations with more ease, with more elegance, more efficiency. And as a consequence, again, we're actually using our strength in a more focused way to actually create the outcome that we want. So those are the three elements or principles of strength: being able to create that coherent alignment, building on that alignment with a more specific frequency and amplitude of our own resonance, or if you like, a more specific focus on our own values. And then knowing how to use those values to guide ourselves through the coming transformations. So then we get to the third stage of developing our intuition. And So the first is called stability, the second is strength, I called the third one sovereignty. Because by this time, we now have enough intuitive strength and intuitive skill that we can use our intuition not just for ourselves and for creating brilliance in our own life, but for supporting the brilliance of others. And again, there are 3 principles. So the first one is about pattern-based logic. Now, this is systems thinking. This is the logic of your intuition. So the logic of your intuition is not about right, wrong thinking. The logic of your intuition is about knowing how to fit everything together into the pattern that will take you in the direction that you want to go. This is what we call systems thinking, because it's based on constantly correcting towards your outcome, towards whatever it is you're attempting to manifest or create in your life. So that's pattern-based logic. And I have done another little video on the difference between right, wrong thinking and pattern-based or systems thinking. I'll put that link down below. So if you want to get a little bit clear on that, just watch that video. So that's the first thing, is systems or pattern-based thinking. So the second principle of sovereignty is actually having a capacity for the positive. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, we all like the positive, or at least, you'd hope so. But the capacity for the positive means that we really have an ability to focus on what we want and not on what we don't want. Again, if I use the internet as an example, well, so many of the arguments on the internet are really about, I don't want that. I don't want someone thinking that way. I don't want someone being that way. It's like, well, what do you want? Do you want a world of, respect, mutual cooperation? Because the more that we focus on what we want, the more ability we have to align things in that direction. Unfortunately, when we focus on what we don't want, we tend to end up wasting our energy. And not only that, but it does really interferes with our ability to work with others. Whereas when we're working with what we do want, it's much easier to create that as an outcome. And you can check in your own mind, just ask yourself, what do I want? And then listen to yourself as you answer that question. Are you listing all the things that you don't want? Like, I don't want to be sick, and I don't want to be shut in my house, and I don't want to have to put up with all this nonsense from these people. It's like, well, all of those things, sure, they're valid, but they're what you don't want. Focus on what you do want. Like, you want to be well, and you want to have personal freedom, and you want to connect with people with whom you belong. So when we focus on what we want, on the positive, it's so much easier to be open to the positive, to the possibilities of life. And that helps us create those, not just for ourselves, but for other people. Which then leads me to the third principle, which is about co-creation. Because learning to create things that work for us as an individual, that's kind of like one skill level. Co-creation, it does require that kind of systems thinking, because everybody, what works for them is slightly different. So we need to be able to weave all those things together into a pattern that is actually whole and that is going to work for everybody. And that is a particular skill set. And it's actually the skill set of sovereignty, but it is something that can be learnt. And I'll just give you a quick example of that, so that, because it is more than just a lovely theory, it is a very real principle. So the very real principle is based on harmonics. Like if you have 2 notes that are played in tune, a third note, the harmonic, will just kind of like appear in the space. Now, it's not magic, it's physics. it's got to do with how these two bass notes interact with each other. And that third note is very real. It can be recorded. It can be analysed in an oscilloscope or whatever you use for analysing sound waves. And so it exists, but it exists because of the relationship of the two notes. You take one of those notes away and the harmonic also disappears. So this is why co-creation is so powerful, and why we don't want to use that right-wrong thinking, because when we use that right-wrong thinking, we tend to go, oh, that's not what I want, and we lose one of the bass notes, which means we're also losing the harmonic. So co-creation, I tell you what, I'll do another video all about the harmonics, but for now, just focus on the fact that co-creation, we can learn to work from the harmonic constantly, so that we can learn how to have co-creation with others. No matter how diverse the situation is, we can co-create with others to create brilliance, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. So there you are. So that's the longer answer of, can you teach intuition? And of course the short answer is yes, but that's the 9 principles that you need to cover in order to teach intuition. So I hope you found that helpful, and until next time, always be brilliant.